Have you ever woken up and felt like a stranger in your own skin, unable to recognize the person staring back from the mirror? Dr. Sarah Chen first noticed something was wrong during her morning rounds at Metropolitan Hospital. Mrs. Patterson, a gentle elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, was screaming obscenities at the nursing staff. Her voice carried the crude inflection of a street criminal, her eyes blazing with unfamiliar rage. When Sarah approached, Mrs. Patterson grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I'm not supposed to be here. This isn't my body. My name is Marcus, and I was in cell block D when everything went black." Sarah dismissed it as post-surgical delirium until she encountered 17-year-old Jake Morrison in the pediatric ward. The shy teenager who'd been admitted for appendicitis now spoke with the refined vocabulary of a literature professor, discussing Shakespearean sonnets with bewildered parents who insisted their son had never read anything beyond comic books. By noon, the emergency room was flooded with similar cases. A businessman arrived speaking only in the broken English of a recent immigrant, while a young mother couldn't remember her children's names, but could perform complex mathematical equations she'd never learned. Each patient insisted they were someone else entirely, trapped in the wrong body. The first news reports called it mass hysteria. Social media buzzed with videos of people acting completely out of character. A renowned chef couldn't remember how to boil water. A kindergarten teacher was found performing emergency surgery on a stray cat with startling precision. The hashtag identity crisis began trending worldwide. Dr. Martinez from the Centers for Disease Control arrived that evening, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely concealed panic. "It's spreading faster than we can track," he told Sarah. "Initial contact seems to trigger the swap within hours. We're calling it the identity virus, though we don't understand the mechanism." Sarah watched through the isolation ward's glass as patients wandered aimlessly, their faces wearing expressions that didn't belong. An elderly man sat in the corner, crying softly as he tried to remember his grandchildren's faces. A young woman stared at her hands as if seeing them for the first time, whispering someone else's name. "The terrifying part," Martinez continued, "is that the personalities seem to be jumping randomly between infected individuals. We've documented cases where a person's original identity resurfaces briefly, only to be replaced by someone completely different hours later." The hospital implemented strict quarantine protocols, but it was too late. Staff members began exhibiting symptoms. Nurse Williams, known for her gentle bedside manner, became aggressive and paranoid. The head of security started speaking fluent French, a language he'd never studied. Even the hospital chaplain forgot how to pray, instead reciting recipes for dishes he'd never cooked. Sarah worked tirelessly, documenting symptoms and searching for patterns. She noticed that physical contact accelerated transmission, but even brief proximity seemed sufficient. The virus appeared to target the neural pathways responsible for personality and memory formation, creating a horrifying shuffle of human consciousness. As night fell, Sarah felt the first signs. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked foreign. Her hands felt clumsy, unfamiliar. She tried to remember her childhood home, but could only picture a cramped apartment she'd never seen. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, but the words were in Spanish, a language she didn't speak. Panic clawed at her throat as she realized the truth. The careful clinical observations she'd been making all day weren't her own thoughts. They belonged to someone else, some other doctor whose consciousness had invaded her mind. She tried to remember her own name, her own life, but found only fragments of other people's memories. In the mirror, her reflection smiled with someone else's expression. She watched her own hand pick up a pen and begin writing in handwriting she didn't recognize. The words flowed across the page in a language she shouldn't understand, documenting symptoms she'd never observed. The identity virus had claimed another victim, and Sarah Chen was disappearing into the collective consciousness of the infected. Somewhere in the city, another person was waking up in confusion, wondering why they knew so much about medicine, why they could remember years of medical school they'd never attended. The pandemic was no longer just changing who people were. It was erasing the very concept of individual identity, creating a world where no one could be certain of their own thoughts, their own memories, or their own name. in that uncertainty, humanity itself began to dissolve.